Hello and welcome to Cryptid by State, Iowa. We have had quite a journey over the past few weeks with very little rest in between. Today we are continuing that mindset as we look at a new state in our favorite series. It took a long time for Iowa to finally reach the top of our list, but after doing some research, I think it should have been talked about sooner. It quite possibly has more cryptids than most other states we have talked about so far. So, without further ado, get your bathroom breaks in now, since we are once again continuing our cryptid family road trip. We are venturing from our previous location of Arkansas and heading pretty much directly north to Iowa. Iowa actually has quite a short history, at least for the time periods we are typically focusing on. As with most, if not all other states, this land was called home by many Native American tribes, such as the Sioux, Lowe, Oto, Missouri, Omaha, Sauk, Meskwaki, Potawatomi, Winnebago, and Illinois. The first well-documented non-native people to visit the land was French explorers Louis Joliet and Father Jacques Marquette in 1673. The two men, along with 5 other crew members, navigated 2 canoes with the goal of mapping the Mississippi River. They rested in what we now know as Iowa, at a point where the Iowa River met the Mississippi. While there, they came into contact with the Illinois tribe, who were friendly. It should be noted that while this is the first recorded visit, due to other hunters and trappers in the area, it is possible that Louis and Jacques weren't actually the first. With this exploration, Iowa was claimed by France. Following this, other French settlers would venture into the area with the goal of trading furs, exploring, spreading gospel, and mining. But no one established any real settlements. During the French and Indian War, the land was transferred to Spain in 1763, and it became part of the Louisiana Territory, or La Louisiane. Finally, in 1787, the first real permanent settlement was established near present-day Dubuque by a miner named Julien Dubuque. Control would return very briefly to the French when Napoleon Bonaparte gained much of Spain's lands in 1800, following the Third Treaty of San Ildefonso. This would be short-lived, since all the lands would then be sold to the United States in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. After this time, Iowa was considered part of the territory of Orleans. During the War of 1812, the Sauk tribe, under the leadership of Black Hawk, and the Fox tribe allied with the British to wrestle control away from the U.S. While they were successful in their ventures, it would prove short-lived, and the U.S. regained control of most of what they had lost. During this whole time frame, Iowa really didn't have many settlers visiting the area, but this changed in 1833 when many people ventured there from many different states. On July 4, 1838, this land was officially separated from the other states we know, and officially was called the Iowa Territory. Then, on December 28, 1846, it became the 26th state to join the Union. Now, Iowa's flag appears to be pretty straightforward in design, but there is an interesting discrepancy compared to others we have talked about. First, this was designed by a woman named Dixie C. Gibbert, who was part of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Its colors were derived from the flag of France, which controlled the land until 1803. The blue stripe represents loyalty, justice, and truth. The white stands for purity, and the red is for courage. In the center is a bald eagle, which is part of the state's official seal, as it is for many others. In its beak it is carrying a ribbon that has the state's motto of "Our liberties we prize, and our rights we will maintain." Under all this is the words Iowa, for obvious reasons. What makes this flag different from all the others is the fact that it is actually called a state banner rather than state flag. This came about when the symbol was first introduced, and the veterans of the Civil War, who were part of the organization known as the Grand Army of the Republic, had an issue with it. Their view was that they had fought and died in the name of supporting the Union, and having a distinct flag would go against the idea of national unity. So, from that point, it would be known as a state banner. Okay, so let's look at the cryptids here. As stated at the beginning of this video, I wasn't sure what beasts we would find here, but I was shocked to uncover the amassed quantity of cryptids are said to call this state home. I think we should start our venture with the various creatures found in the sky. My friends over at the National Cryptid Society have a report from a person named Collier who reported a different type of thunderbird sighting. In the morning hours of October 2009, Collier and his roommate were driving home. While traveling down the road, they were passing freshly harvested cornfields. Suddenly, something caught his eye, and when he looked, he observed a massive bird flying 5 to 6 feet above the ground. While watching, the bird swooped over their car, and this is when they got a good look at it. They described it as having an 8-foot wingspan, it was moving incredibly fast, and weirdest of all was that it looked exactly like a raven. As they drove, they noticed that it started flying in the same direction they were, and it was easily keeping pace with the car, which was traveling between 35 and 40 miles an hour. It stayed with them for a quarter mile before it suddenly began to climb and quickly swooped over a thick tree line. They lost sight of the bird after that, and he mentioned that he has seen both golden and bald eagles in flight before, and they weren't what he saw. I find it interesting that we have a possible thunderbird sighting that doesn't have the typical look. Not to mention that if their description is accurate, then this raven would have been almost double the size of the largest known species. Researching this further, I found another sighting in 2020 in the town of Boone, where a giant blackbird was seen and its wings were so large that when they flapped, it blocked the moonlight. Since we started with a rather tame sighting, let's move to a couple more fantastical reports. The first of which would be a cryptid that I very rarely get to talk about, and that would be a dragon. There isn't a lot of information with this one, but it has been allegedly seen at least 5 different times. The first was in Bedford on August 11, 1887 by a man named Lee Corder. It was spotted flying around Lee's cornfields, where it eventually landed with a thud and then returned to the air. He described it as having protruding eyes, a forked tongue, its body was serpent-like and was about a foot wide, and would move with a writhing and twisting motion. He said it was covered in scales that glistened when the sun hit them. Then it was seen again in the town of Independence. On October of 1890, this version was covered in green scales, had the mouth of an alligator, massive wings, and its head had 2 horns coming from the back of it. Things went silent for a while, and then 2 unnamed witnesses claimed to see a brown-skinned dragon with a serpent-like body, huge 15-foot wide bat-like wings. Its head was like a seahorse, and it had a long skinny tail that flowed behind it. Apparently, they watched it flying about the sky until it started to ascend and eventually vanished from sight. In 2005, while driving through Burlington, Megan and her husband Dennis added their sighting to the list. At 3 a.m., they saw a 10-foot-long serpent-like being flying in the night sky with its bat-like wings. Interestingly, they also claimed that the head resembled that of a seahorse. Finally, a report from Grand Mound claims that they are frequently seen during a blood moon and tend to travel in groups of 3. In this sighting, it is said that they are known to steal cows, and one version was seen that was blue in color and appeared to have 4 wings. In 2006, a pastor in Colfax said he also saw the dragon, but no extra description was given. I don't know what to think of these, but there do seem to be a lot of sightings, if they are to be believed. Our last flying creature is the one that is up my alley, and it quite possibly could be the earliest sighting of a Mothman-like creature. The being known as the Van Meter monster was seen in the town of Van Meter for a period of 5 weeks, spanning 2 months. And there are some other possible sightings many years later. Back in September of 1903, U.G. Griffith was walking home at 1 a.m. when he saw a bright light on the roof of a business called Mater and Gregg. Thinking it may be the light from a burglar, he stepped closer, but in a flash, the light vanished and immediately appeared again on a building across the street. After this sight, he decided to quickly head home. The very next night, a man named Dr. Alcott was awoke by a similar bright light shining on his window. As he peered out, he saw what he described as a 9-foot-tall, half-human, half-animal type of being that had huge bat-like wings, one small blunted horn on its head, and it appeared to be producing the light. The man ran out to the street armed with a gun, and he fired upon the monster, but it didn't seem to faze it. That same night, a banker named Clarence Dunn had decided to stay in his bank for the night for fear that the mysterious light was from robbers. At 1 a.m., he heard scraping noises coming from outside the door of his building. Out of fear, he fired his gun directly at the noise and assumed he killed whatever it was, but he was too terrified to check it out. The next morning, he inspected the area, but only found the broken glass from the door, and strangely, there were 3-toed prints left in the dirt. The following night, another man was awoke by the sound of scraping metal. When he looked out his window, he saw the creature standing on top of a telephone pole and promptly fired upon it. The monster was unfazed, but it shone a bright light on the man, and it produced a strange gas as it flew away. On that same night, it was seen hopping around in the streets like a kangaroo. On the 4th night, the creature visited a schoolteacher who described it as looking like the devil. Finally, fed up with the visits, the townsfolk rounded up an armed posse to hunt the creature down. After hearing weird noises, they eventually tracked it down to an abandoned coal mine that was close to a brickyard. It didn't take long before the creature emerged, along with a second, smaller version of itself. The men fired upon it, but it produced its signature light and emitted a gas that stunned everyone present. Resolute in their mission, the posse waited at the mine for the creature to return. When they did come back, the men fired again, but it just produced the same gas, and both beings vanished within the cave. The townsfolk then decided to block up the mine to trap the creatures. This plan seemed to work, since no more sightings were reported. However, in 1980, a man was walking near the mine when he claimed to have seen a large 5-foot-long bat-like creature flying in the sky above him. Then, in 2000, a family were driving through the area, and they said they saw a strange, large black bird lying dead alongside the road. Curious about what they saw, they turned around, but the body had vanished. So, apparently the creature wasn't as dead as they thought. To this day, the mine remains sealed, and the town holds a festival every year dedicated to the monster. Next up, we are moving to a more terrestrial being, and it is a very interesting dogman sighting. On July 1st, 2014, a former deputy sheriff for Lynn County was called out to help in the search of a 16-year-old boy who had been sucked into a storm drain that emptied into Cedar Lake. Eventually, the search lasted until dark, and at 11:30, the deputy decided to park his cruiser by the electrical company's storage yard. The whole area was surrounded by a 10-foot chain-link fence, but his reason for being there was to investigate a nearby spillway. He left his cruiser and started walking west to the spillway that emptied into the lake. As he neared, he noticed a faint red light glowing some distance away, appearing to move down the nearby railroad tracks. This didn't concern him, since he simply assumed it was a car's taillights, but he later found out there wasn't a road on that side. The light faded out, and he continued with his search. 5 minutes later, he suddenly heard a loud snorting sound that reminded him of sniffing, coming from where he had seen the red light prior. As he looked in that direction, he was shocked to see the same dull red glow, and this time it was apparent that it was actually eyes. The deputy raised his flashlight, a decision he regretted later, and illuminated the spot where the eyes were. To his terror, he saw an 8-foot-tall hairy creature standing there, just looking at him. He claims it was about 450 pounds, had pointy ears on the top of his head, and a long, pronounced snout. He judged the size due to him being 6'4" and weighing 280 pounds, and this thing was a lot bigger than him. The being looked at him for a moment, and then turned and vanished into the tree line. The deputy pulled his gun and quickly made his way back to his cruiser. According to him, he didn't reholster it until he was on the main road. Even as such, the deputy says that he felt his weapon probably wouldn't have helped him in that situation. Following this encounter, he left the force, became a minister, and refused to go back to that location. As usual, I couldn't talk about every cryptid found here, but that is the purpose of the honorable mentions section. You probably guessed right that this state has quite a few unique Sasquatch said to roam about. This would include a 5-foot-tall, turkey-eating version that had the body of a bear, the face of a monkey, and was known as the Lock Ridge Monster. In Ventura, there are stories about a hairy creature known as the Mugwump. A lot of other stories simply call these Bigfoot wild men. Alien big cats are frequently seen here, much like a lot of other states that we have talked about. A real oddity that I know I have mentioned previously is the fence rail dogs. These are massive black dogs with red eyes that may or may not be spirits. A fun one is the reports of phantom kangaroos. On August 4th, 1999, Lois Eckhart from Iowa City claimed to see a deer-like creature with a large boxy nose, big belly, and long thick tail. A few weeks later, Mary Stangl saw a similar creature in Ottumwa. For those curious, the local zoos were contacted and they confirmed that no kangaroos had escaped. There are claims that piranhas can be found in the Missouri River. It is said that the Fort Calhoun nuclear plant has played a role in their survival due to it keeping the waters warm enough. Speaking of which, many divers report seeing a giant snapping turtle named Big Blue that is the size of a Volkswagen hood in a pond in Mason City. Keeping with the water theme, East Okoboji Lake is said to be home to a lake monster that is a greenish-brown color, has a head the size of a bowling ball, and has been known to bump up against or ram boats. Actual in-depth descriptions vary, but some think it is a serpent, while others say it is just a large fish. Interestingly, Native American lore does have stories about an underwater panther. Finally, there is a fantastic story about the Skunk River monster that is quite in-depth and certainly worthy of being on the main list. However, it is due to this fact that I feel I may need to make a separate cryptid spotlight on it. So, be on the lookout for that. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and that I made Iowa proud. This is why I love this series so much. Up until doing the research, I never realized this state had so many cryptids. It truly is weird that it doesn't get as much attention as other states. Please remember to keep voting for which state you would like to see next in this series by writing the name of it in the comment section. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.